Okay guys, we are starting our reading lesson for this week, and today's February 1st, Monday. So the book we're going to be reading this week is called Ruby's Wish. So I want you to look at the cover of the book. What culture do you think Ruby's Wish is about? What culture? By looking at the cover. What culture? Kelsey, what do you think?
I think Japanese.
Japanese. Or?
China.
Chinese, okay. What do you know about this country? Do y'all know anything about Japan or China?
Oh, China.
No, not really?
I do.
Okay, Kelsey, I can't hear. What'd you say, Javea?
I don't know who my sister does. She watches Chinese.
She watches Chinese? Interesting. Kelsey?
They speak different languages.
They speak a different language?
And by their face, like, it's not their color, but their face, like, it looks different. They look old. They look really old.
They look old, okay. They do look different. So they probably dress differently. What about their food?
Oh, yeah, they use chopsticks.
They use chopsticks to eat their food.
And,
rice, sushi.
Sushi.
Okay. Those types of foods they might eat in their culture. So about what you need to know about this culture before we start reading too, Kaylee, is that a long time ago in this culture, and in many cultures, women were treated differently. Do y'all know anything about women being treated differently a long time ago?
Oh!
Kelsey?
And back then, the women didn't get to vote.
That's right. Women didn't get to vote a long time ago. Good. So women were treated differently. So you're going to read this story, and you're going to notice that Ruby and women in general are treated differently. But times have changed, and that's a good thing, right? So we're going to read Ruby's Wish by Sharon Yim Bridges, illustrated by Sophie Blackall. Okay, I want you guys to pay attention to the characters as we're reading and listening. If you walk down a certain road in a certain city in China, past the pet market with its yellow and green rice birds hopping in their bamboo cages, and the goldfish and the terrapins in their porcelain bowls, you will come to a block of houses, 5 houses wide and 7 houses deep. Many families live here now, and the buildings are brown with age and dirt. But if you look closely, you will see that once upon a time, this was all one house, the magnificent home of one family. The house was built by an old man who returned from the Gold Mountain. That was what the Chinese called California, when many men left to join the gold rush there, and few came back again. But as I said, this man did not come back, and he came back very rich. Oh, but as I said, this man did come back, and he came back very rich. And he did what rich men did in old China. He married many wives. His wives had many sons, and these sons also had many wives. So at one time, the house was filled with the shrieks and laughter of over 100 children. Amongst these children was a little girl that everyone called Ruby, because she loved the color red. In China, red is the color of celebration. On New Year's Day, children receive red envelopes full of good luck money. Brides wear red on their wedding days, but Ruby insisted on wearing red every day, even when her mother made her wear somber colors like all her other cousins. Ruby would tie up her jet black hair with red ribbons. Because he had so many grandchildren, Ruby's grandfather hired a teacher to come to the house. Any grandchild who wanted to learn could join the classes. This was unusual in China in those days when most girls were never taught to read or write. Whenever the weather was fine, classes were held in the garden. The windows of Ruby's grandfather's office opened onto that garden. Often he would rise from his desk to gaze out of his windows at his grandchildren.
Then what if they learn?
Good question, Bryson. He said, what did they learn if they didn't learn to read or write? I guess maybe you'll find out. One day, Ruby's grandfather looked down from his window to see the high white wall of the garden plastered with calligraphy. His grandchildren had been practicing their handwriting. Ruby's grandfather laughed to see that many had smudged ink on their hands and faces. Then he noticed a sheet that was more beautiful than the rest. Which of his grandchildren had produced such wonderful calligraphy? Down in the garden, the teacher was praising Ruby. Her ears were turning as bright red as her jacket. But if Ruby was doing as well as her boy cousins in her studies, she had to work much harder. When the boys had finished their studies for the day, they were free to play. But the girls had to learn about cooking and keeping house. In fact, as far as their mothers were concerned, these were the only things girls had to learn. One by one, the girls stopped going to the classes, all except Ruby. She would catch up on her embroidery and at night. Many nights, her candle flickered along long after everyone else had gone to bed. One day the children were asked to write a poem. Ruby wrote, "Alas, bad luck to be born a girl. Worse luck to be born into this house where only boys are cared for." Ruby's teacher was very impressed by the poem. He showed it to Ruby's grandfather. Ruby's grandfather was also impressed, but he was worried about what the poem said. He summoned Ruby to his office. Ruby found her grandfather sitting in his chair, her poem spread open on his desk. "Did you write this poem?" asked Ruby's grandfather. "Yes, I did, grandfather," answered Ruby. "Did you really think that in this house we only care for boys?" "Oh, no, grandfather," said Ruby, very sorry that she had upset him. "You take good care of all of us, and for that we are all grateful." "Little Ruby," her grandfather said gently, "I really would like to know why you wrote this poem. How are the boys better looked after?" "Well," said Ruby, trying to think of a small, unimportant thing, "when it is the moon festival and we are each given half a moon cake, the boys always get the half with the yellow moon yolk." Said her grandfather, as if he was still waiting. "Is that so?" "Yes," continued Ruby, "and when it is the lantern festival, the girls are given simple paper lanterns, but the boys have red lanterns in the shapes of goldfish, cockerels, and dragons." Ruby's grandfather chuckled. He'd never thought about it before. He could imagine how much Ruby would have liked a red lantern. "But most importantly," said Ruby, staring hard at her red shoes, "the boys will get to go to university, but the girls will be married." "Don't you want to be married?" asked her grandfather. "You know, you are very lucky. A daughter of this house can marry any man." "I know, grandfather," said Ruby, "but I'd much rather go to university." Ruby's grandfather touched her hair. "Thank you for talking to me, Ruby," he said. "Go on with your lessons. Make the most of them while you can." So Ruby went on with her lessons. Some of the boys grew up and went away to university. Some stayed in the house and started families of their own. But when they grew up, all the girls were married and sent away to live in their husbands' homes. Ruby knew it would soon be her turn. In the ponds, Ruby could see the orange and white carp gulping for breath under a thin layer of ice. It would soon be Chinese New Year. Ruby felt sure it would be her last one at home.
How did she sunk in the snow? So she's doing this. And she's doing
On New Year's Day, Ruby put on red velvet shoes and tied red ribbons in her hair. Then she went to wish everyone a happy New Year. She started with her married cousins, then worked her way up through her parents, aunts, and uncles. Each one gave her a red packet full of lucky money. Finally, she bowed before her grandfather. "Good luck and prosperity, grandfather," she said. "Good luck, little Ruby," replied her grandfather, and he handed her a very fat red packet. Ruby could feel the eyes of all her family on her as she opened the lucky red envelope. Can you guess what was in it? It wasn't money. It was something much better than that. Notice she's all grown up now.
It's a locket.
It was a letter from a university saying that they would be proud to accept Ruby as one of their very first female students. So that's how Ruby got her wish. It's a true story. And how do I know this? Well, Ruby is my grandmother, and every day she still wears a little red. Okay, so now that we're done reading, we're going to look at what our focus of the week is. Our skill for reading is interactions of characters. So as part of analyzing characters, we look at what they do, how they respond to what they do, how they respond to conflict, and what they are thinking. We also look at how they interact with other people in their lives. Okay? So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to look at the two main characters. Who are the two main characters? Ruby and her grandfather. Okay? So what you're going to do is think of character traits for Ruby, 2 of them. And then you're going to give me evidence of why you think she is that. Maybe you think she's smart. Maybe you think she's brave. Maybe you think she's intelligent. That's the same thing as smart. So you would give me an example of why you think she's intelligent right here. Okay? So if you think that she's brave, then you need to give me evidence of why you think that. What did she do that made you think she was brave? Okay? Then you're going to do the same thing with the grandfather. What character traits could we say for the grandfather? Kelsey?
He is brave too because he went to the mountains.
He is brave too because he what?
Went to the mountains and got gold. He went to the mountains.
He went to the mountains. Okay. What about his relationship with Ruby? What does that tell you of what he did with Ruby?
He loves her.
He's loving and caring. Was he being understanding when he found that poem?
Yes.
Yes. He could have been angry, gotten mad at her, and thinking she was being
jealous.
Maybe not jealous, but maybe she was not thinking about others. Maybe she was just thinking of herself, but honestly she was thinking of others. She was thinking about all the girls, right? Not being treated fairly. So instead of getting mad, he was very understanding and wanted to know why she wrote the poem. Okay? So that's what we're going to focus on this week. Understanding character traits. Okay? And how they interact with one another. Okay? But before we start that, let's go over your vocabulary words for this week. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down. We're going to look at your words for this week. All right, there's a lot of pages here. Okay, first one is insisted. Insisted means to say something in a forceful way, to be firm. Okay, if I insist that you work on your lessons instead of going to recess, then you're saying it in a forceful way. Okay? Flickered.
To shine unsteadily.
Okay, so kind of like a star. When you see a star in the sky, it's flickering, right? It's shining, but sometimes it will look like it's going off and on, flickering. Okay? Impressed. To make someone feel respect or admiration. Okay? So impressed. I am impressed that you got a 104 on your spelling test. Okay? So that means I think that that's awesome and that you admire that. You can spell those words and not make one mistake. Summoned. If you're being summoned, that means you're being called or you're sending for someone to meet you. Okay? Gulping. To gulp means to take a big breath of air deeply and quickly. Prosperity. Success. Somber.
Dull or dark colored.
Dull or dark colored, so not bright, so the opposite of bright. Gaze. We've had that one before, so we should know what gaze means. To look steadily, kind of like you're staring. Calligraphy is a decorative handwriting or handwritten lettering. So y'all notice the calligraphy they use? They use symbols for their words. Okay? University, in this book, it's talking about higher learning. When she says she wants to go to a university, she's talking about going to a higher level of school to learn. Okay? So those are your vocabulary words this week. So that's all we needed to go over for today. And then I'm going to let you guys work on your character traits. And then we'll come back and go over these before we move on. Okay, so if you are working on this at home or listening to this video, I want to make sure that you've tried to do this paper on your own before listening. If not, that's okay. We're going to go over mine, and then we're going to share if we had something different in class. So for Ruby, I put that she was bold. She's bold because of her poem that she wrote and because she is pursuing her education when most girls are taught not to pursue an education, but to work on cooking and cleaning, right? Sewing. So that's bold of her to pursue an education during this time period. She's hardworking because all other girls stopped going to classes, but not Ruby. She also stayed up late to finish her embroidery, which if you don't know what embroidery is, it's like things that are sewn on maybe a purse or a jacket or a sweatshirt. Okay, so that's Ruby. Anybody have something different they want to share about Ruby? Bryson? Just hold it. I'll just hold it.
Happy because she smiles when the other girls frown. Intelligent because she went to a college.
Okay, just Ruby. Okay, anybody else have something on Ruby?
I do.
All right, Kelsey, something different, not the same. It's got to be different. Yeah, just talk like that.
She is kind. She is not thinking about herself. She is brave. She wants to go to university. He is calm.
Wait, just Ruby. Okay, good. Evangeline, did you have something different on Ruby? Kind of the same thing? Okay, good. She's bold, hardworking, kind, intelligent. All of those. Brave would have been good. Okay, for the grandfather. So he is understanding is one that I put because he takes time to talk to Ruby about her poem. You could also say thoughtful because he's thinking about her and not just getting mad about her poem. Okay. Thoughtful helps get Ruby into a university. Okay. So caring, thoughtful, understanding. Anybody have something different than those? Kelsey, what was yours?
He is calm. He does not yell at Ruby when she gives him the poem.
Okay, good. And you have caring, and he cares.
He cares about Ruby.
About Ruby. Okay, but make sure you're giving a specific example of how he's caring. Evidence means something in the story that tells you why they're like that, or made you think they're like that. Kaylee?
It's because he got money for the girls. Brave because he went to the mountains and got money.
Okay, good. All right, so that's what we're focusing on this week. Character traits and the evidence that you can find in a story about characters. And that helps us when we're reading because we are able to analyze them and connect with them when we're analyzing their character traits, right? Okay? So that is it for today. We'll have one more lesson, and that will be over your spelling words. But for reading, that is all we're discussing today. The character traits and Ruby's wish.